Technical SEO can seem overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be that way. Use this video and our free checklist to set up your site for success. Yo, what's up SEO hustlers? Welcome back to our channel where you learn how to rank 1 in Google and how to start your own profitable online business. In this video, I will show you all the technical SEO basics and how to implement them. So, without any further ado, let's dive right in. Technical SEO is basically all about two things: crawling and indexation. Crawling is about helping Google to discover your pages in the fastest way possible, and indexing and indexation is about helping Google to understand what pages to index so you can appear in the search results. So, starting with crawling, if you look at this image, I want you to imagine a subway network where Google is the train, the links are the rails, and the pages are the stations. And as you can see, Google right here will follow each of the links to discover the new pages, just like a subway network would go from place A to place B. And this is basically the concept of crawling, so Google will discover new pages as it follows certain links. But imagine that one of these pages or stations is not available. It is not working, it gives back an error. That basically means that Google is not able to discover the other pages because it cannot reach the destination. It cannot visit the station and it cannot find the new links to discover those new pages. That is basically what crawling is about, and if you think about this concept when you're optimizing for crawling, stuff will get a lot easier. And on top of that, imagine that Google only works during daytime, which can be referred to as the crawl budget. So not only do you have to help Google to discover all pages, but also do it in the fastest way possible, so you can be sure that Google didn't miss any page or at least visited your most important pages. And finally, once Google visits those pages, you want to be as clear and as complete about the information that can be retrieved on the page as possible. So the title, headings, body content, etc. That will help Google to understand what the page is about once it visits that page. Secondly, you have indexation. And to simplify this concept, think about a library with different sections, bookcases, shelves, books, chapters, and pages. Now, let's say you want to visit Bali in Indonesia. Where do you go? You walk to the travel section and to the traveling books, and you go and find the books on Bali or Asia, and you might compare some books, and finally within those books you will find the page that is all about traveling to Bali. Think about this as Google's index. So you can compare the books to websites and the pages in those books to web pages. So this is basically how Google works as well. So once it visits your pages, it will store it somewhere within their index that is related to a certain topic. So we need to help Google to understand what a page is about. And with this concept, it can be very simple and it doesn't have to be that hard. But once you start optimizing your website, you will notice that you might have some duplicate pages. So imagine you walking into the library, opening a book on traveling through Indonesia, and all of the pages are the same, or information is unclear or missing, or maybe even pages do not show up at all. And this is basically how you need to think about indexation to make the best decisions possible to set your site up for success. Now, with those two concepts in mind, let's look at the most common technical issues and technical SEO basics. So starting with accessibility, did you know that Google could access your website in 8 or even more different ways? So what I mean by that is, let's look at this table. Your website could be solely accessed by using HTTP or via HTTPS and a trailing slash, which is the slash at the end of the URL, or with www, or with HTTP, www, and the slash, and so on for HTTPS if you have set up your server correctly. Hopefully you will already have an SSL certificate to make things more secured, but still Google can access your page in a lot of ways. Now, what does this mean? This means that your website will become 8 times bigger for Google to crawl. So going back to the subway, it has a lot of pages to go through and to discover your newest content, because it simply doesn't know what your preferred version of your website is. So we need to help Google a little bit, and this is how you do it. First, let's see if our website is accessible via multiple ways. So if you click on the bar here, you can see that our website is currently using HTTPS without www and with a trailing slash. So basically we want Google to use this version of our website. So let's see what happens if we would add www. And if you have the redirect path plugin or for example SEO Minion, you can see that it is perfectly redirecting with a 301 to our preferred version. And you can also do the same by removing the slash or by removing HTTPS. And it should all redirect to the preferred version that you want to set up. The way that you can set it up is by editing the Htaccess file. So that is basically in the root of your server and can be accessed via any FTP software such as FileZilla. So for example, I have the file here and I could edit it and give it certain rules. And what these rules do is when the Google bot requests a certain version of your website, it automatically rewrites the URL and serves Google the preferred version. So you can copy and paste this piece of code in your Htaccess file to set it up properly if you want it without www and with HTTPS and a trailing slash. If you are using any other version, I recommend using Alida's free plugin, which helps you to set up these redirects. So for example, you want to do HTTP to HTTPS, you can see and easily copy paste this piece of code into your Htaccess file, or if you want to go from www to non-www or any other construction, you can set it up here. However, you can break your website, so be careful with that. Make sure to have a backup of your original Htaccess file and ask for support from your web host, because they are probably very familiar with these kind of questions. So don't be too hard on yourself, make it easy and reach out to your web hosting as well. One other thing to pay attention at is what you have set in your WordPress settings at general. So these URLs should match the version that you want to prefer and serve to Google. So if you're using www here or non-www, make sure that your rules in your Htaccess file are consistent with that. Otherwise, you will get like an infinite redirect loop going on and your website will break. Moving on to the URL structure. There are basically 2 rules of thumb here. Make sure your URLs are as short as possible. It doesn't really help to stuff as many keywords in there as you can. You do want your keyword in there, but not like overdo it. It doesn't make any difference. Secondly, you should be able to understand what a page is about by only reading its URL. So make them short and sweet, put your main keywords in there, but don't overdo it. So let's look at a few examples that I personally really like. Here at Coolblue, for example, if we go to laptops or even like Apple MacBooks, you can see that the URL setup is super simple. They have the category and then the subcategory. So basically this EM part is for the language, but then they have laptops and Apple MacBooks. And if you would only see this URL, you would understand what the page is about, and it doesn't have to be over complicated. It doesn't have to be anything more than that. So for example, they should not put laptops here because it's already in here. So don't overdo the keyword stuffing. Let's check out another one. For example, eBay. Let's also go to their laptops and see how they've set it up. And as you can see, it's a bit different. They do have Apple laptops in the URL, so probably from reading the URL you could understand what it is about, but they have a few other numbers in here, and that is probably because their CMS, their technical system, is built in a way that they would add this information to the URL, but for the user and for Google it doesn't bring any extra value. So try to be as short and sweet as possible. Also, you want to use hyphens for spaces, so no underscores, no percentages. Put your keywords in there. Don't use any special characters. Only use underscore letters, so not uppercase and lowercase, only lowercase words. And finally, avoid stop words in there. So no DA for, just make it Apple laptops, Apple MacBook. Don't make it laptops for Mac computers, etc. That's way too long, so avoid those words as well. Now, the way you set this up within WordPress is you go to your settings and your permalinks and you use the post name structure. So this basically will put the title of your post or your page in the URL. As simple as that. Don't make it more complicated. If you have like a web shop or you would like the category in between there, you could also do a custom structure and add, for example, the category and then the post name after that. So that will probably be something like this. That's also perfectly fine, but don't add any other additional information like the year that you're in or this structure. That's not really SEO friendly. Use the post name and perhaps with the category attached to it, but nothing more complicated than that. All right, moving on to breadcrumbs. Breadcrumbs are important for SEO for the following reason. First of all, breadcrumbs are these links that help you to navigate a website. So, for example, Coolblue has them vertically here, and eBay has them horizontally here. And you might think that they are meant for the user to navigate back and forth, which is true, but it also helps Google to understand relations between certain pages and certain categories and subcategories. Because remember how I talked about crawling and indexation, and if you look at crawling and, for example, a website architecture like this, you would cluster certain topics. So, for example, starting from the home page, going to the laptops, and then going to the different brands like Google and Apple and HP and Dell and etc. And below that, all their models. And for example, if you follow another path, you would go to the consoles and you would have like Xbox and PlayStation, etc. And as you can see, this is really structured, and this will help Google to understand relationships between your pages, and you create these so-called topic clusters or content hubs, which are really helpful in the world of SEO. Now, breadcrumbs are usually inserted automatically by your WordPress theme, but if they are not appearing, you can implement them via the Yoast SEO plugin. So if you go to search appearance and click on breadcrumbs, you can enable breadcrumbs here, and you do need to put some code into your WordPress theme to make them appear. So make sure to check out their tutorial on how to set it up. All right, next up is metadata. Remember how I talked about providing clear and complete information to Google once it visits your page? One of the most important technical elements as well is the meta title and the meta description. Meta relevance is used in some cases, and the meta keywords is not being used at all, so you can leave that one out. And the way you can check that and audit them for your own website is by going into the source code and looking for these HTML elements. But first, I would like you to install the Detailed SEO plugin, because it basically pulls all the information that we need and that we're going to discuss in the video. But you can also audit it manually by going to right click and click on View Page Source, or the keyword shortcut Ctrl U. And as you can see, we have our title here, and there only should be one title, not to confuse Google, and it should contain your most important keywords. Now, if we want to look for the meta description, we can also look for meta in the HTML code. And as you can see here, this one is dedicated to the description. And you can see we have a nice little description set up here. And basically what it does is when you perform a search in Google, the title will pop up as the link and the meta description is the description of the page. So you want to be convincing, you want to put keywords in there, you want to provide USPs and put a call to action in there to convince users to click on it. But also with regards to Google, to help Google to understand what the page is about. Now, like I said, life will be way easier if you install this plugin because you only have to click on it and you can see if there's a title, whether it has the right amount of characters, whether there's a description, and so on and so on. Because in some cases you might encounter, for example, that it is missing or that it is not properly optimized. So use this plugin to your advantage to check your meta title, meta description, and other elements that we're going to discuss in this video. There aren't probably a lot of use cases in which you will encounter meta robots, but make sure to be aware of them. And if you encounter no index, you should be really careful with that because you're basically telling Google not to index a certain page. So I would rather have you to have more pages indexing you want than less, obviously, to get as much as traffic in as possible. But let's say you want to no index a certain blog post. So if you scroll all the way down, you can go to the Yoast section and to the advanced section, and you can set this function for meta robots to no. But basically set it to no index. So let's quickly see what happens if we update that page. Now if I want to refresh this one and look in the source code and look for robots, you can see that this piece of code has been added, basically telling Google not to index the page, but they can follow the links on the page to discover other pages. But be very careful with this setting because, like I said, it will remove your page from Google search results completely, and you don't want that necessarily. Alright, next up is facets and parameter URLs. So if you run an e-commerce store, you want to pay close attention because let's look at a real life example of Essex. So let's say you're selling shoes in different sizes and colors and brands and price ranges. A lot of URLs can be created when you use the filtering options. So let's look at this example. For example, using a size. And when I select the size, you can already see that this piece of information is added to the URL. However, the title of the URL is still exactly the same as when I didn't select that filter. So basically we already have some duplicate content going on, but let's select another filter, for example, the price range. And as you can see, this piece of information is also added to the URL. And with all these options, you will have thousands of extra URLs that Google will crawl potentially if you don't optimize for it correctly. So the way you deal with this is with canonical tags. So as I showed you, this title and this description is exactly the same as for this one. So we have duplicate content, right? The titles are exactly the same. The products have been changed in order, but Google is still getting all this information and it's really unclear what this page is about. So the way you solve this is by using canonical tags. And as you can see, this URL is not indexable because the canonical tag is actually referring to its original page without any filters. And this is usually the optimal situation because otherwise Google could potentially index millions of URLs because all of the combinations that could be made. And the way you can check that is with this plugin or by pressing Ctrl U and looking for the canonical tag in the source code. So here you can see that the canonical tag is just the one we saw in the plugin, and it is set nicely to the main URL, so without all the additional filters. Now, usually canonical tags are inserted automatically by your theme. So if it's not implemented correctly, reach out to the support of the theme creators to fix all the issues that you might have with your web shop or any canonical tags that are not implemented correctly. So another thing that I would like to point out is that when you once you're using a separate page as your home page, which is basically a different slug, you might want to double check whether the canonical is set properly. So if you scroll all the way down and you go to advanced in Yoast, you can set the canonical tag here. So basically for us that would be Htaccess.com. So make sure that it is not included like this within the source code. If you see that, make sure you set it back to the original homepage like you want to set it up. So it's really nice that Google will not index all of the URL combinations that can be made by using the filtering options, because all of them are canonicalized to the version without the filtering option. However, remember how I told you about crawling, and Google can still crawl all of these URLs and then find out, oh, I should not index these pages. And that is a waste of crawl budget. So how can we make sure that Google will only crawl the necessary URLs? And you can help Google by using the robots.txt file. So if you scroll down here in the plugin and you go and click on robots.txt, or you go to the root domain and put robots.txt behind it, you will get access to your robot.txt file. And basically you can set all kind of rules in here for the Googlebot to crawl or not crawl certain folders or certain URLs that contain specific parameters or filters. So what we saw here is that this piece of information is added once we selected the size and the price range. So we can see something with preference, or this is popping up. And if you look at the robot.txt file and you scroll a bit down, you can see that they are disallowing Google basically not to crawl all of those URLs that contain this piece of information, which is also in here. So basically this is how they solved that problem. So Google will not crawl all the thousands of combinations, because in the robot.txt file we gave the Googlebot an instruction and say, hey, all the URLs with the wildcard, so it doesn't matter where this piece is appearing, together with the star, the wildcard, it is basically telling to Google, do not crawl any URL that contains this piece of text wherever it is sitting in that URL. And this is not only helping you to optimize your crawl budget, but also to prevent duplicate content, because the bot will not is not allowed to crawl that URL. Now, if you have a small website, don't worry about disallowing too much, but you still can optimize your robots.txt file, because it will give instructions to the Googlebot. And you can do it very simply by firing up just a notepad editor and writing some general rules. So first, let's say that it applies for all user agents, and maybe we want to disallow certain parts of our website, such as you might have a search function. So you want internal searches to be excluded from crawls. If you do have a small web shop with sizes or colors, you want to include a piece that is about colors or sizes. So you would like to set it up probably like this, and maybe another one like this. For example, size is. And finally, you want to add your sitemap, your XML sitemap in here as well, because that is something the Googlebots will extract from your robot.txt file, and you need to put the full URL in. So let's say for us that would be something like this: seohustlers.com/sitemap.xml. Make sure to include everything, so the HTTPS part as well, and then you can just save it as a robots file. So just call it robots, and then you can upload it to your FTP server in the root of your folder. So just by dragging and dropping it here. And if you do so, it should be already available. So let's check it by going to this URL. Yeah, and as you can see, the robots.txt that we just created is fully functional. And finally, we have the Xml Sitemap. And the Xml Sitemap is basically a list of all of your URLs of your website. And remember how I talked about the subway network and how Google could discover new pages? This is basically helping Google and saying, hey Google, here is a list of my complete website with all the pages included. And the way you set it up is by using an online generator, but I wouldn't recommend that because it is not automatically updated once you remove or add a page. So you can use either Yoast, or maybe your theme has an option to enable the sitemap. So if you go to the Yoast settings at General and Features, you can turn the sitemap on and off here. And once you've done that, we can check whether it is properly working by going to sitemap.xml in your URL bar. That is the general address by Yoast by default. And as you can see, I'm being redirected to an index where we have the post sitemap and the page sitemap. So when I click on the post sitemap, you can see that all of my blog posts are nicely listed here. And when I go to the page sitemap, you can see that all of our pages are here as well. So this really helps Google to get a full overview of your website pretty quickly. These are really tiny sitemaps, so it doesn't add a lot of value, but the bigger your website is, the more important your XML sitemap will become. Another thing to mention is that I did not include sitemaps for tag pages and category pages. So if you go back to the settings, then you can go to search appearance and taxonomies. And here you can select whether you want to show categories in the search results or not, and it will also automatically exclude them from the sitemap. And the same goes for tags or, for example, post formats or portfolios. And the reason that we decided not to index them and not to have them crawled is because these pages do not have a lot of value. So, for example, let me show you the Technical SEO category page. It is basically only listing the blog post in that category. It doesn't have any content. It's a really thin page. It's only listing this blog post. And as you can see, the title is not optimized. And I have no intention on optimizing this page. So I would rather have these pages not crawled and not indexed to optimize for a little bit for crawl budget and for example, link equity, if that was the case. But it's totally up to you. If you use tags intensively or categories and you have them optimized, it might be an idea to include them and to optimize your pages. If not, make sure to uncheck those boxes. All right, that's it with regards to the technical SEO basics. But I do want to talk briefly about site speed because it's such an important element. But like whole blog posts are dedicated to the topic to optimize for site speed. But I do want to briefly talk about some quick optimizations that you can do because it has become a ranking factor in 2018, and with the core web vitals launching in June, it is becoming increasingly more important. So go to Pagespeed Insights and check out your score. And what Google basically does is giving all kind of suggestions to improve your site speed. So as we can see here, our server response time is pretty bad. That is basically has to do with your web host. So don't buy cheap web hosting, invest in a proper server so you can get a really nice response time from that. What else do we see? Blocking resources, CSS files and JavaScript files that are not being used. And so on and so on. But what is nice is that Google is actually suggesting certain WordPress plugins that you can install to fix like the most common problems. So for example, we are not using images in the latest next-gen format, and it is linking to a plugin that will convert these images to that format. So that's awesome. But I have created a nice little list for you to look at. And these are also the basics that we optimize for our affiliate websites, which is caching. Caching is basically when a user visits your page and it visits other pages or visits your website again in the future. Certain files and elements are already stored and can be accessed quicker, so their whole experience is improved. and they're basically two plugins which are really good. We personally use WP Rocket. It's one of the best caching plugins out there, but it is paid. If you're looking for a free and good alternative, check out WP Fastest Cache. Next to that, you always want to compress your images before you upload them. You can simply do this by going to tinypng.com, and you can drag and drop any file that you want to upload, and it will resize the file to a way smaller size, and making your web pages way faster. So make sure to do this every time you upload images. As you can see, this image is resized from almost 4 MB to like 700 KB. So it's a huge, it's like 84% safe. You can download the image and then upload it to your website. If you've already uploaded your images, don't worry, you can use the Imagify plugin, and it will compress your images within your existing folders and within your WordPress environment. Also, make sure to properly resize your images. So let's say you need a 400 by 400 one. Do not upload the bigger one, since it's just a waste of size and it will decrease your load time. And you can do so by going to Pixlr, which is an online photo editor. And you can simply resize any image by going to Image, Image Size, and then resize the image to something you need, and save it, download it, and re-upload it to your website. Also, make sure to install a lazy loading plugin for your images, such as A3 Lazy Load, because that plugin will make sure that an image is only loaded when it comes into the viewport of a user, or for example Google. So let's say you have 10 images on a page, but they're like way below each other, like this blog post. You will save up a lot of time by only loading the images that someone needs, and your page will be a lot faster. Finally, make sure to use web-safe fonts or Google fonts. So Google doesn't have to download the font from an external source, which will save up a lot of time when it is one of the default fonts. So make sure to check out whether you're using a web-safe font or a Google font to speed up your website. To make your life easier, we've created a free technical SEO checklist. So go to the link in the blog post and make a copy for yourself by going to File, Make a Copy. And here you can see all the technical SEO basics that we discussed in this video, what you need to do, where you need to do them, and some additional resources if things might still be unclear. And on top of that, linking to 3 tools to audit your technical SEO basics. So first of all, the Chrome browser is really useful for using Inspect Element or viewing the page source, but also the Detailed SEO extension and Chrome plugin that I showed you. And on a final note, the Screaming Frog spider to mirror how a Google bot would crawl your website, and it will also show you all kind of optimizations you can do. Alright guys, that is a wrap. Please let us know in the comments if you have any questions so we can help you out. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one. Peace!